Good morning. I'm Ronnie Ziggy, and I'm delighted to be introducing this morning's Insight program. We welcome everyone, all races, all faith backgrounds, all ethnicities, all gender identities, orientations, and expressions, all those who suffer disabilities, and all political perspectives who come in peace. We begin our program today with the chalice lighting. We light this chalice as a symbol of our covenant with each other. We covenant to be open and kind to one another and willing to explore. Thank you, Debbie Bostic. Please join me in our affirmation of covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church, and the quest of truth its sacrament, and service its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the good. Thus do we covenant with one another. Our tradition at UUVC is to be generous with our time, talent, and treasures, so each week we take up a collection to show our commitment to ourselves and to the community at large. This month's Share the Plate recipient is Saline County Safe Haven, a safe house for domestic abuse victims. For more information, visit the UUVC website and watch Kim Townsend's interview with Tara Whitley. To make a contribution, send your check made out to UUVC to 403 Barcelona, Hot Springs Village, Arkansas, 71909, with share in the memo line. Reverend Kacela will delve into issues that may become some of the most important choices of one's lifetime. Reverend Kacela currently serves as minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces, New Mexico, while as fulfilling chaplain duties in the New Mexico Air National Guard based in Albuquerque. Former military service includes 4 deployments, including the Iraq War. Before entering parish-based ministries, Reverend Kacela served as chaplain to patient populations facing medical crises in both hospital and hospice settings. Various blogs, podcasts, and sermons of the Reverend Dr. Kacela may be found by internet search. Publication of his latest work, The Black UU Survival Guide, offering his view of how Blacks can thrive in UUism, is set for release during June 21.
I want to begin by thanking my colleague, the Reverend Mark Walls, for inviting me to prepare this talk for you on my book, The Black UU Survival Guide, How to Thrive in Unitarian Universalism, and How White Allies Can Keep It 100. I hadn't actually thought about talking about this book to the congregations, but after Mark was an advanced reader, he called me and said, listen, you got to do a piece for us on that. So here's the piece that I wanted to put together for both the Hot Springs congregation and for the congregation here in Las Cruces. I love Black people, the UU tradition and UU people, and I want you to do the same. M. Scott Peck defines love as acting in a way that promotes the spiritual development of self and others. My aim with this talk is promoting the spiritual development of all Unitarian Universalists. The psychologist Beverly Tatum tells a story of her son when he was 10 years old. He was very tall for his age, so when people met him, he was so accustomed to people asking him or saying to him, "You're very tall for your age." It happened so frequent that he began expecting their response during introductions and would say, "I know what you're going to say. I'm tall for my age." Tatum says her son knew that to be true because his height became salient for him. We see what salience is to us. Dictionary.com defines salience as the quality of being noticeable or important and prominent. Unitarian Universalists are not immune to salience. UUs see what is salient to us. We don't enjoy seeing or want to see differences, especially differences of race and ethnicity. But the differences are real. Things salient to me will not be salient to you. However, that does not mean that my experience is any less valid than yours. During the pandemic, I realized it was time to write the Black UU Survival Guide. I wish I didn't have to write this book, but the book called me. And being the person that I am, I said, here I am. Chances are someone listening today will say to themselves, here we go again. We need to welcome Black people, indigenous people, and show them how to survive in our churches. That's my mission with this book. You don't have to take my word for it because the numbers speak for themselves. And here's a snapshot of UU membership since 1960. In 1968, there were 1,135 UU congregations or churches. In 2000, that number has dropped to 1,051. That's a 9.5% decrease. In 2020, the number has declined to 1,027. That's a further 2.2% decrease. Our membership in 1968 was 177,000 people. That's UUA wide. In 2000, that number had dropped to 155,500. That's a 13.9% decrease. And in 2020, our numbers stand at 153,000, which is a further almost 2% decrease. Now, RE has really taken a hit. In 1968, there were almost 105 RE enrollments. In 2000, the number was down to 61.5 thousand, or 61,500 RE enrollments. In 2020, the number is down to 34,800. So for 68 to 2000, the decrease is 67%. And from 2000 to 2020, the decrease is another 43.5%. So the numbers speak for themselves. These declines tell us that we need everyone on board for our denomination to survive. I wish that race wasn't so salient for me. I wish I didn't see race and ethnicity so prominently on a daily and often hourly basis. But how can I not see it? I'm a Black man, the most marginalized class among American citizens. Every Sunday, the New York Times Sunday Review has 2 or 3 articles on race and culture. Every day, news outlets report about police brutality or shootings of African American men and people of color. Every day, NPR runs stories about race and culture. Every day, I walk around Las Cruces or spend time in UU spaces, and I'm the only African American person around. UUs of color wonder, why don't white UUs see this? The race scholar Alex Kotlovich, author of The Other Side of the River, says, with the George Floyd video, white Americans can now see it. The corollary for me is that when I hear a story about police brutality or another shooting of a Black person, I wonder, Why didn't that police officer realize that if he pulled the trigger, he'd be put on unpaid leave, fired, indicted for shooting a black person, or, as in the Derek Chauvin case, convicted of murder? But they don't seem to get it or see it, no matter how many times it plays out on police video or the news or in the courts. Why? The chances of getting caught are slim, and there is no perceived consequence. The latter is an incorrect assumption. There is a huge consequence. When one of us suffers, all of us suffer. The difference is in the consciousness. The next statement is hard for me to say, but it needs to be spoken. There's a common thread between police brutality of people of culture, as we'll hear later, and white UUs toward UUs of culture or UUs of color. The same reason police continue to brutalize black men when everyone said stop is the same reason we have issues in Unitarian Universalism. It's the reason the UUA Board of Trustees appointed the UUA co-presidents, Reverend Bill Sinkford, Reverend Sophia Betancourt, and Dr. Leon Spencer, who served the UUA from 2017 to 2018. It's the reason the UUA board launched the UUA Commission on Institutional Change, led by Reverend Leslie Takahashi. Our culture has significant disparities, although unseen, that must be changed. In UU spaces throughout our association, ministers and congregants of color wonder, why don't white UUs act like they see microaggressions happening in congregational life? Why must we keep explaining ourselves and telling people we're treated differently, and UU's basic response is, I don't see it? My book points out that white UUs belong to the general society, and the general society has this problem with people of color, or as Resmaa Menakem calls us, people of culture. Resmaa Menakem is a consultant on anti-racism who has worked with the Minneapolis and St. Paul police departments and with companies and cultures all around America working with this issue of anti-racism, multiculturalism, equity, and inclusion. Race is not as salient to white people. It's not their fault. Our UU culture centers whiteness. For this reason, I wrote my book, The Black UU Survival Guide: How to Thrive as an African American Unitarian Universalist. My book points out that white UUs belong to the general society. And in the general society, there is this problem with people of color, or as Resmaa Menakem calls us, people of culture. Menakem is a consultant who consults around the world on issues of anti-racism and anti-white supremacy and helps companies and organizations deal with equity, inclusion, and multiculturalism. Race is not as salient to white people, but it's not their fault. Our UU culture centers whiteness. For this reason, I wrote my book, The Black UU Survival Guide: How to Thrive as an African American Unitarian Universalist and How Allies Can Keep It 100. This book is a manual for both African Americans and white UUs. It's my way to help black UUs navigate congregations and associational life within the UU world. The book aims to help white UUs understand the black UU experience and learn how to be allies. The bottom line is this: we need each other to survive and to become a beloved community. The book does not discriminate against Latinos, Asians, indigenous people, nor any other identity within the UU world. I want everyone to read this book, but I can only speak from my own identity. The book's main point that African Americans in the UU world encounter a culture different from traditional African American religious culture and therefore can benefit from learning the ropes which are often invisible, hidden in plain sight, unspoken, and unwritten. African American UUs often encounter implicit bias, conflict, and confusion. They often have nowhere to turn for answers and problem solving. Fewer African Americans join UU churches, and UU churches find African Americans often leaving. Furthermore, UU churches fire UU ministers of culture disproportionately to white ministers. Here's one example of the differences I highlight in the book. In most African American Protestant churches, it is easy to join a congregation. In fact, they want you to join right away. There is no waiting or cooling down period, nor unspoken rule that visitors will hang around for several services and figure out what the church is about before they join. They don't concern themselves with dues paid to the denominational headquarters. The primary concern in African American congregations is salvation and survival. In UU culture, joining a church is different. I attended First Unitarian Church of Dallas for a year before I realized how to join. Why? Because in Dallas, they placed the membership book on the chancel one Sunday a quarter, and on that Sunday, the minister announces, if you want to join the church, come down after the service and sign the book, and the minister will greet you. That invitation went right over my head for a whole year. My book offers a remedy to this confusion. That is no indictment on the church or the minister, but it points to drastic differences between African American and UU church culture. They speak two different languages and someone must translate. My book is a UU Rosetta Stone. It is endorsed by the Reverend Bill Sinkford, the first African American UUA president, Jesse King, the first Black chair of the UUA Ministerial Fellowship Committee, Kelly Ingram, our own mixed race DRE, and Lisa Bailey, a white UU who is married to Reverend Gordon Bailey, an African American UU preacher who preached for us in Las Cruces on MLK Sunday. What's fascinating about this book that white readers have embraced wholeheartedly is the way it describes the African American experience. And I'm also candid in the book and acknowledge my bias. I give concrete examples of how white people can keep it 100. Keeping it 100 means keeping it real. Keeping it real is about honesty, truth-telling, sense-making, and sharing powers with UUs of color. Here's a difference you may not be aware of. In many religious traditions, ministers welcome guest preachers frequently. When an African American minister shows up unannounced at a Black church, the host minister usually welcomes the guest minister to sit in the pulpit and say a few words or even give the morning's prayer. In UU congregations, the settled minister is expected to preach almost every Sunday, except during the summer when many ministers take vacation. There are very few guest ministers in UU churches. Of the 4 UU churches I've served, only one, led by my colleague, Reverend Mark Waltz, invited African American clergy to preach. The others strain to invite other UU ministers to preach. In UU culture, they expect guest ministers to call ahead and say, you're coming so as not to surprise or offend the settled minister. That's a huge difference. I believe this different approach to collegiality misleads UU congregants because it doesn't model for members and friends the need for them to invite their friends of color or other friends at all. The UU practice is rooted in historical Unitarian and Universalist power structures. UU churches assert unspoken control over ministers by expecting them to preach all the time. Ministers who give in to this pressure develop resentment and burn out. This pattern is rooted in Unitarian Universalist historical pushback to ministerial authority. UU boards and congregants don't like ministers being in charge nor hearing ministers say no. I'm not making this up. Read the 2013 UUA Commission on Appraisal report on this, which is titled, Who's in Charge Here? It lays out Unitarian Universalists' struggles with ministry and authority. And please don't think I'm criticizing anybody in this current setting. This is documented in UU history. In African American churches, ministers do not take the summer off. In many parts of the UU world, churches close in the summer. I have never been to an African American church that closed during the summer because in African American religious life, they expect the holy to be on duty 24/7, not on vacation during the summer. Now, I'm not mocking the UU world because it's not funny. I'm merely pointing out a difference in the cultures that white UUs may not be aware of. I pointed out in the book the consequences of these unseen and unbelieved differences is that UU culture becomes very difficult for African Americans to navigate. And because of their frustration, which often results as they signal the need to change so that they can feel like they too belong, they leave. And when they leave, UU congregational life suffers. In my book, I point out to African Americans these conditions exist, and there are ways to confront them in order for them to stay and work through the differences. But it's incumbent upon white UUs to share the power. If white UUs insist UUs of color do all the multicultural work while whites remain the same as they continue doing business as usual, we cannot create beloved community. The optics of change do not require visibility to validate the need for change. Part of the power sharing arrangement is exercising your faith by accepting that a person of culture's ask is valid. And the ask deserves the 3 C's: consideration, curiosity, and change. Consider the request, become curious, and change UU culture. I want African Americans to be sticky in our congregations. That means they arrive and find the church environment tacky, as if they're walking through a room with Velcro on the floor. Velcro requires both sides to stick to each other. It is made of 2 different fabrics, hooks and loops. One side contains the hooks, the other side contains the loops. When the 2 fabrics come together, they stick and are hard to pull apart. If we are to create beloved community, if African Americans are to survive in the UU world and allies are going to keep it 100, we must become hooks and loops. The UU world needs more hooks for people of culture. These hooks can include taking seriously the differences between the 2 cultures and making accommodations so people of culture feel welcome and know their experience is real and matters. That means spending time with people of culture when they show up and learning who they are. It would mean lowering defenses when people of culture say they feel they are treated differently in UU spaces. It would mean becoming more curious about UU practices and how they might exclude or marginalize people of color. It would mean that African Americans be encouraged to develop loops, which in my estimation means invited to stay around, but show them the way so they grow into a UU identity. That would not mean asking new African American UUs to join the board or to become committee chairs. But it would mean inviting them to talk at coffee hour or to attend a committee meeting, and especially invite them to join the church whether they've been around for one Sunday or 6. The Velcro approach to improving UU stickiness demands resilience, compassion, and a willingness to let people of culture in UU spaces belong in the fullness of who they are and not have to conform to a white UU standard. In order for African Americans to survive in the UU world, white UUs must keep it 100. This means white UUs must do the work of multiculturalism, anti-racism, anti-oppression, inclusion, equity, and diversity. People of culture do this work daily. We cannot not do it. We have no choice. It's a matter of survival. And here's the clincher. Black and white UUs need each other to survive. I invite you to get a copy of my book, The Black UU Survival Guide. It's available on my website, ReverendDrXK.com, Amazon, Smashwords.com, Barnes & Noble, or wherever you buy your books. I want you to love Black people, the UU tradition, and UUs. Remember, it's a matter of survival. Ashe, amen, and may it be so.
I hope the days come easy and the moments pass slow, and each road leads you where you wanna go.
And if you're faced with a choice and you have to choose, I hope you choose the one that means most to you.
And if one door opens to another door is closed, I hope you keep on walking till you find the window.
If it's cold outside, show the world the warmth of your smile.
But more than anything, more than anything, my wish for you
Is that this life becomes all that you wanted to. Your dreams stay big, your worries stay small. You never need to carry more than you can hold. While you're out there getting where you're getting to, I hope you know somebody loves you
and wants the same things too.
Yeah, this is my wish.
I hope you never look back, but you never forget all the ones who love you and the place you left. I hope you always forgive and you never regret, and you help somebody every chance you get. Oh, you find God's grace in every mistake, and always give more than you take.
But more than anything, more than anything,
my wish for you is that this life becomes all that you wanted to.
your dreams stay big, your worries stay small. You never need to carry more than you can hold. While you're out there getting where you're getting to, I hope you know somebody loves you
for you is that this life becomes all that you want it to. Your
Dreams stay big, your worries stay small. You never need to carry more than you can hold. And while you're out there getting where you're getting to, I hope you know somebody loves you and wants the same things too. Yeah, this is my wish. This is my wish. I see trees of green, red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and for you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
I see skies blue, clouds white, bright blessed days and the dark secret night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful